Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bob Keyser. This is the Son of Man Urantia Project. Today's episode is Chapter 54, The Last Talk in the Temple. Jesus, along with 11 apostles, 30 Greeks and various disciples, and Joseph of Arimathea, arrived at the temple a little after 2 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Jesus intended for this talk to be both his last effort at appealing to the Jewish people and his final indictment of the enemies who would destroy him, the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, in other words, the chief rulers of Israel. Earlier, the various groups had the opportunity to question Jesus, but this afternoon, everyone stayed quiet. The temple was orderly because the merchants and money changers had not dared to re-enter since Jesus had driven everyone out the previous day. Jesus was about to talk to the people about the mercy to humanity and to admonish the false leaders and bigoted Jewish rulers for the last time. Before beginning, he looked down lovingly on his people. The talk. For a long time I have been with you, going up and down the land, announcing the Father's love for humanity. And many have seen the light, and by faith they have entered into the kingdom of heaven. In connection with this mission, the Father has done many wonderful works, even resurrected the dead. Many sick and hurt have been made whole because they believed. But all of this stating of the truth and healing disease has not opened the eyes of those who refuse to see the light, those who are determined to reject this gospel of the kingdom. In every way consistent with doing my Father's will, my apostles and I have done our utmost to live in peace with others, and to follow the reasonable requirements of the laws of Moses and the traditions of Israel. We have persistently sought peace, but Israel's leaders will not have it. By rejecting the truth of God and the light of heaven, they are aligning themselves with the side of error and darkness. There cannot be peace between light and darkness, between life and death, between truth and error. Many of you have dared to believe my teachings and have already entered into the joy and liberty of being conscious of sonship with God. And you will bear witness for me that I have offered this same sonship with God to all the Jewish nation, even to those very men who now seek my death. And even now, my Father would receive these blind teachers and these hypocritical leaders if they would only turn to him and accept his mercy. Even now, it is not too late for this people to receive the word of heaven and to welcome the Son of Man. My Father has long had mercy for this people. Generation after generation, we have sent our prophets to teach and warn them, and generation after generation, they have killed these heaven-sent teachers. And now, do your willful high priests and stubborn rulers go right on doing this same thing? As Herod brought about the death of John, you likewise now make ready to destroy the Son of Man. As long as there is a chance that the Jews will turn to my Father and seek salvation, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will keep his merciful hands outstretched to you. But once you have filled up your cup of stubbornness, and once you have finally rejected my Father's mercy, this nation will be left to its own fate, and it will quickly come to an inglorious end. This people was called to become the light of the world, to show forth the spiritual glory of a God-knowing race. But you have departed so far from fulfilling your privilege that your leaders are about to commit the supreme folly of all time. They are on the verge of finally rejecting the gift of God to all people, for all ages, the revelation of the love of the Father in heaven for all of his creatures on earth. And once you reject this revelation of God to humanity, the kingdom of heaven will be given to other people, to those who will receive it with joy and gladness. In the name of the Father who sent me, I solemnly warn you that you are about to lose your position in the world as the standard bearers of eternal truth and the custodians of the divine law. I am, right now, offering you your last chance to come forward and repent, to show your intention to seek God with all of your hearts, and to enter, like little children and by sincere faith, the security and salvation of the kingdom of heaven. My Father has long worked for your salvation, and I came down to live among you and personally show you the way. Many of both the Jews and the Samaritans, and even the Gentiles, have believed the gospel of the kingdom. But those who should have been the first to come forward and accept the light of heaven have constantly refused to believe the revelation of the truth of God. God revealed in man, and man uplifted to God. This afternoon, my apostles stand here before you in silence, but you will soon hear their voices ringing out with the call to salvation and with the urge to unite with the heavenly kingdom as the sons of the living God. And now I call on my disciples and believers in the gospel of the kingdom, as well as the unseen messengers by their sides, to witness that I have once more offered Israel and her rulers salvation and deliverance. But you all see how the Father's mercy is slighted and how the messengers of truth are rejected. Regardless, I caution you that these scribes and Pharisees still sit in Moses' seat. And so, until the Most Highs who rule in the kingdoms of men finally do overthrow this nation and destroy the place of these rulers, I urge you to cooperate with the elders of Israel. You are not required to join in their plans to destroy the Son of Man, but in everything related to the peace of Israel, you are subject to them. In all these matters, do whatever they tell you to do, and observe the essentials of the law, but do not mimic their evil works. Remember, this is the sin of these rulers. They say what is good, but they do not do it. You well know how these leaders put heavy burdens on your shoulders, burdens awful to bear, and that they will not lift as much as one finger to help you carry these heavy loads. They have oppressed you with ceremonies and enslaved you with traditions. Furthermore, these self-centered rulers delight in doing their good works so that they will be seen by men. They spout many laws and make themselves look good in their official robes. They expect the best places at the feasts and demand the best seats in the synagogues. They crave praise in the marketplaces, and they want all men to call them rabbi. And even as they are seeking out all of this honor from men, they secretly steal widows' houses and profit from the sacred temple services. As a charade, these hypocrites pray long in public and give charity to attract everyone's attention. While you should honor your rulers and respect your teachers, you should call no man father in a spiritual sense. For there is one who is your Father, even God. Neither should you seek to lord it over the others in the kingdom. Remember, I have taught you that he who would be greatest among you should become the server of all. If you dare to brag about yourselves before God, you will certainly be humbled. But the person who truly humbles himself will surely be praised. Seek in your daily lives not self-glorification, but the glory of God. Intelligently subordinate or reduce the importance of your own wills to the will of the Father in heaven. Do not mistake my words. I bear no hatred for these priests and rulers who even now seek to destroy me. I have no ill will for these scribes and Pharisees who reject my teachings. I know that many of you believe in secret, and I know you will openly state your loyalty to the kingdom when my hour comes. But how will your rabbis justify themselves, since they claim to talk with God and then dare to reject and destroy him who comes to reveal the Father to the worlds? Woe on you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You would shut the doors of the kingdom of heaven to sincere men because they happen to be unlearned in your way of teaching. You refuse to enter the kingdom, and at the same time, you do everything within your power to prevent anyone else from entering. You stand with your backs to the doors of salvation and fight with all who would enter. Woe on you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites that you are! For you do indeed travel across land and sea to convert one man to your beliefs. And then, when you have succeeded, you are not content until you have made him twice as worse off as he was when he was a heathen. Woe on you, chief priests and rulers who steal the poor's property and demand heavy dues from those who would serve God as they think Moses ordained. You who refuse to show mercy, how can you hope for mercy in the worlds to come? Woe on you, false teachers, blind guides! What can be expected of a nation when the blind lead the blind? They both will stumble into the pit and be destroyed. Woe on you who disguise your purpose when you take an oath. You are tricksters, since you teach that a man can swear by the temple and break his oath, but that anyone who swears by the gold in the temple must remain bound. You are all fools and blind. You are not even consistent in your dishonesty. For which is the greater, the gold or the temple that has been supposedly blessed by the gold? You also teach that if a man swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if one swears by the gift that is on the altar, then he will be held as a debtor. Again, you are blind to the truth. For which is the greater, the gift or the altar that blesses the gift? How can you justify such hypocrisy and dishonesty in the sight of God in heaven? Woe on you, scribes and Pharisees and all other hypocrites who make sure that they tax mint, anise, and cumin, while at the same time disregarding the weightier matters of the law, faith, mercy, and judgment. Within reason, the one you should have done, but you should not have left the other undone. You are truly blind guides and dumb teachers. You strain out the gnat and swallow the camel. Woe on you, scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites! You can be relied on to clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside there remains the filth of extortion, excess, and deception. You are spiritually blind. Do you not recognize how much better it would be to first clean the inside of the cup, and then whatever spills over would itself clean the outside? You wicked degenerates, you make the outward show of your religion to conform with your interpretation of Moses' law, while your souls are soaked in vice and filled with murder. Woe on all of you who reject the truth and spurn mercy. Many of you are like freshly painted white grave chambers which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are filled with dead men's bones and all sorts of uncleanliness. And in the same way, you who knowingly reject God's advice look holy and righteous on the outside, but inside your hearts are filled with sin and hypocrisy. Woe on you, false guides of a nation! Over yonder you have built a monument to the martyred prophets of old, while you plot to destroy him of whom they spoke. You garnish the tombs of the righteous and flatter yourselves that, if you had lived in the days of your fathers, you would not have killed the prophets. And then in the faith of such self-righteous thinking, you get ready to kill him of whom the prophets spoke, the Son of Man. To the extent that you do these things, you prove to yourselves that you are the wicked sons of them who killed the prophets. Go on, then, and fill up your cup of judgment. Woe on you, children of evil! John was right when he called you the offspring of vipers. And now I ask you, how can you escape the judgment that John decreed on you? But even now, I offer you in my Father's name mercy and forgiveness. Even now, I offer the loving hand of eternal fellowship. My Father has sent you the wise men and the prophets. Some you have killed, and others you have persecuted. Then came John announcing the coming of the Son of Man, and him you destroyed after many had believed his teachings. And now you are getting ready to shed more innocent blood. Do you not understand that a terrible day of reckoning will come, when the judge of all the earth will require this people to account for the way they have rejected, persecuted, and destroyed these messengers from heaven? Do you not understand that you must account for all of this righteous blood, from the very first prophet you killed, down to the times of Zechariah, who was slain between the altar and the sanctuary? And if you go on in your evil ways, this accounting may be required of this very generation. O Jerusalem and the children of Abraham, you who have stoned the prophets and killed the teachers that were sent to you, even now I would gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you will not. And now I leave you. You have heard my message, and you have made your decision. Those who have believed my gospel are even now safe in the kingdom of God. To you who have chosen to reject the gift of God, I say that you will not see me teaching in the temple anymore. My work for you is done. Watch, I now go forth with my children, and your house is left to you desolate, forsaken. And then Jesus motioned to his followers to leave the temple. Status of individual Jews. The fact that the Jewish spiritual leaders at one time rejected Jesus' teachings and conspired to bring about his cruel death does not in any way affect the status of any individual Jew in his standing before God. And the Jewish people's past actions should not cause those who claim to be followers of Jesus to be prejudiced against an individual Jew as a fellow human being. The Jews, as a nation, as a social-political group, paid in full the terrible price of rejecting the Prince of Peace. Long since, they ceased to be the spiritual torchbearers of divine truth to humanity. And this is no valid reason why the individual descendants of these long ago Jews should be made to suffer the persecutions that have been done to them by unworthy, intolerant, and bigoted people, the professed followers of Jesus of Nazareth, who himself was a Jew by birth. There have been many times when this unreasoning and un-Jesus-like hatred and persecution of modern Jews has resulted in the death and suffering of innocent Jewish people, whose very ancestors, back in Jesus' day, heartily accepted Jesus' gospel and died unflinchingly for that truth they so wholeheartedly believed. What a shudder of horror passes over the onlooking celestial beings as they watch the followers of Jesus indulge themselves in harassing, persecuting, and even murdering the later-day descendants of Peter, Philip, Matthew, and other Palestinian Jews who so gloriously yielded up their lives as the first martyrs of the gospel of the heavenly kingdom. How cruel and unreasoning to force innocent children to suffer for the sins of their ancestors, misdeeds they know nothing about, and for which they could no way be responsible. And to do such wicked deeds in the name of Jesus, who taught his disciples to love even their enemies. It was necessary in this recital of Jesus' life to show the way that some of his fellow Jews rejected him and conspired to bring about his humiliating death. But we warn everyone who reads this story that this historical presentation in no way justifies the unjust hatred, nor condones the unfair attitude which so many Christians have held toward individual Jews for many centuries. Kingdom believers, those who follow the teachings of Jesus, must cease to mistreat the individual Jew as one who is guilty of the rejection and killing of Jesus. The Father and his Creator's Son have never ceased to love the Jews. God is no respecter of persons, and salvation is for the Jew as well as for the Gentile. The fateful Sanhedrin meeting. At 8 o'clock on this Tuesday evening, the fateful meeting of the Sanhedrin was called to order. On many previous occasions, the Supreme Court of the Jewish nation had informally ordered Jesus' death. Many times, this imposing ruling body had determined to put a stop to his work, but never before had they resolved to place him under arrest and kill him at any and all costs. It was just before midnight on Tuesday, April 4th, AD 30, that the Sanhedrin, as it was then made up, officially and unanimously voted to impose the death sentence on both Jesus and Lazarus. This was their answer to Jesus' last appeal to the rulers of the Jews that he had made in the temple only a few hours earlier. And it showed their bitter resentment toward Jesus' last and vigorous condemnation of these same unrepentant Sadducees and Pharisees. The passing of the death sentence on the Son of God even before his trial was the Sanhedrin's reply to the last offer of heavenly mercy ever to be extended to the Jewish nation as such. From this time on, the Jews were left to finish their brief and short lease on national life wholly in accordance with their purely human status among the nations of Urantia. Israel rejected the Son of God who had made an agreement with Abraham, and the plan to make the children of Abraham the light bearers of truth to the world had been shattered. The divine agreement had been annulled, and the end of the Hebrew nation drew on quickly. The officers of the Sanhedrin were given the orders for Jesus' arrest early the next morning. but with instructions that he must not be arrested in public. They were told to make a plan to take him in secret, preferably suddenly and at night. Understanding that he might not return that day, Wednesday, to teach in the temple, they told these Sanhedrin agents to bring him before the high Jewish court sometime before midnight on Thursday. The situation in Jerusalem. At the end of Jesus' last talk in the temple, the apostles were once more left bewildered. Before Jesus had begun his terrible scolding of the Jewish rulers, Judas had returned to the temple. So all 12 of them heard this last half of Jesus' last talk in the temple. It is unfortunate that Judas Iscariot did not hear the first and mercy offering half of this farewell speech. He did not hear this last offer of mercy to the Jewish rulers because he was having lunch with some Sadducees and relatives with whom he was discussing the best way to break away from Jesus and his fellow apostles. It was while Judas was listening to Jesus' final denunciation of the Jewish rulers that he, finally and fully, made up his mind to abandon the gospel work and wash his hands of the whole business. Even so, he left the temple with the 12 and went with them to Mount Olivet, where, with his fellow apostles, he listened to that fateful talk on the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the Jewish nation. And he remained with them that Tuesday night at the new camp. The crowd who heard Jesus swing from his merciful appeal to the Jewish leaders to that sudden and scathing reprimand that bordered on ruthless condemnation were stunned and confused. That night, while the Sanhedrin sat ordering the death of Jesus, and while Jesus sat with his apostles and some of his disciples out on the Mount of Olives, predicting the death of the Jewish nation, the rest of Jerusalem was thinking about the one question that no one would ask. What will they do with Jesus? At Nicodemus's house, more than 30 leading Jews who were secret believers in the kingdom met and discussed what they should do if an open break with the Sanhedrin happened. Everyone present agreed that they would make a public confession of their loyalty to Jesus as soon as they heard of his arrest. And that is just what they did. The Sadducees, who now controlled and dominated the Sanhedrin, wanted Jesus killed for the following reasons. First, they were afraid that the people liked Jesus so much that it might endanger the existence of the Jewish nation by possibly involving the Roman authorities. Second, his passion to reform the temple was directly costing them money. Cleansing the temple had affected their pocketbooks. Third, they felt they were responsible for preserving the social order, and they feared consequences if Jesus' strange and new doctrine of the brotherhood of man was spread any further. The Pharisees had different reasons for wanting to see Jesus dead. They feared him because, first, he was against their traditional hold on the people. The Pharisees were ultra-conservative, and they bitterly resented these radical attacks on their supposedly vested honor as religious teachers. Second, they felt that Jesus was breaking the law, that he had shown complete disregard for the Sabbath and many other legal and ceremonial requirements. Third, they charged him with blasphemy, because he seemed to say that God was his Father. And fourth, and now they were furious with him because of this last talk where he bitterly denounced them at the end of his farewell speech. The Sanhedrin, having formally ordered Jesus' arrest and execution, adjourned their meeting close to midnight, after agreeing to meet the next morning at 10 o'clock at Caiaphas' house, the high priest, so that they could draw up charges against Jesus for his trial. A small group of the Sadducees had actually suggested that they just go out and assassinate Jesus, but the Pharisees completely refused to agree to such a thing. And that was the situation in Jerusalem and among humanity on this eventful day. As a huge host of celestial beings that was hovering right over this momentous scene on earth, every one of them anxious to do something to help Jesus, their beloved sovereign, were powerless to act because they were held back by their commanders. All right, everyone, that's it for chapter 54, the last talk in the temple. Coming right up later today is chapter 55, Tuesday evening on Mount Olivet. All right, everyone. Defend liberty. Protect those kids. Get out there and find some way to make this whole situation a little bit better. Find some way to serve your fellow man for nothing more or less than just because. Godspeed. Bobby Keyser. Out here.